Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and it's the 15th of December 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So, some regulatory news over the last 24 hours. Elizabeth Warren, who is a senator in the US, has put together a bipartisan bill that basically aims to put a bunch of rules on crypto. Now, of course, this bill is trash. Like, I'm just going to straight up say it. It just makes absolutely no sense, and it's not well researched at all. And obviously, this bill is, I guess, in reaction to the FTX fallouts, which, again, makes no sense because nothing in her bill would actually have prevented the FTX fallout. Because I think what a lot of people are missing is that FTX, regulated or not, which is funny enough, they basically committed fraud. They lied, and you can do that even if you're regulated, right? So even if you put guardrails in place, it doesn't really stop someone from lying and committing fraud and basically being so opaque that you don't actually know what's going on with this service, right? But basically, there was a part of it that I highlighted here, which said, part of the bill, or I guess like part of what Elizabeth Warren said, which says the legislation would direct the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN, within the Treasury Department to designate digital asset wallet providers, miners, validators, and others as money service businesses. This makes zero sense. A money service business is a centralized entity, and there are a lot of things that you need to do as a money service business that miners and validators and wallet providers just wouldn't be able to do. Like, it's literally not possible for them to do it. So it's already, in my mind, a dead in the water kind of bill. I mean, I don't think this has any chance of going through. I think this is just political posturing. But generally, I want there to be regulatory clarity for a number of different reasons. But if this is what we're getting, then I kind of lose faith here. Like, it's really hard for me to look at this and be like, okay, well, we're moving towards a better kind of way of doing things in the US, I guess, a better regulatory framework, and we're working towards coming up with an actual workable solution, but none of that is happening. All we're seeing time and time again is that something in crypto blows up, right? I mean, yeah, okay, it's not always CeFi. There are other things that blow up, like on-chain things, and we saw Terra and other such things like that, but then the regulations or kind of like laws that get proposed are always very reactionary, and they cast a really wide net. And this is like this passage that I just read out here. That's an extremely wide net. They're just basically trying to capture everything. And as I said, regulating or designating these parties as money service businesses wouldn't have prevented the FTX collapse at all. This would have done nothing for that. So and all this does is basically, let's step back a bit. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's just say for some reason this regulation went into place. What would happen is that everyone that was operating these businesses in the US, instead of adhering to these regulations, they would just move out of the US or shut their business down, because it's near impossible, if not impossible, to adhere to regulations like this, and it also stifles innovation. No one wants to be doing all this reporting and all this kind of like tracking of these things just to, I don't know, adhere to some kind of really bad regulation, right? So as I said, though, this seems dead in the water. It doesn't seem like anything to be concerned about. But the main concern I have is that we just keep getting shittier and shittier legislation introduced when we should be getting the opposite. And I mean, not to say that it won't happen in the future, not to say that we won't get something workable in the future, but from everything that I've seen, it's just been really bad. And not to mention how the SEC has gone about things in crypto. I mean, like, really, crypto has shown me that in the, I guess, regulatory system, and has really just confirmed my already existing beliefs, that the regulations that are often put in place aren't really there to protect anyone but the vested interests that put the regulations in place in the first place. Like, the SEC hasn't protected anyone in crypto. Like, who have they protected? They're always coming after the fact, right? Like, for example, the most high profile, I think, thing that happened in crypto over the last few years was the EOS ICO, right? Like, the EOS ICO in 2018 was a year-long ICO. They raised a lot of money. They basically, I mean, it was very scammy, very shady from the beginning. And then the SEC went after them long after the fact and then gave them a $24 million fine, slap on the wrist. EOS is not designated as a security. They got the fine for, I guess, running an unregistered securities offering at the time. And Block One, the creators of EOS, got to keep basically the majority of the money that they raised. They didn't do anything for EOS. All the EOS bag holders are underwater, right? So who did the SEC protect? And this is just one example. They're not protecting anyone. All they're doing is posturing. All they're doing is assuming more power for themselves. They're just caring, and people like Gary Gensler only care about their own career. So crypto has really, really shown a light on this for a lot of people, is that these regulations, these governments, these kind of like legislation and laws that go into place, a lot of the time have nothing to do with helping you or protecting you, and everything to do with helping and protecting the state. And I know that might be a little bit out there, and I'm not saying that all regulation is bad, and I'm not saying that centralized entities shouldn't be regulated. Of course they should, but there are a lot of regulations out there that I don't think really serve any purpose. As I said, like the SEC hasn't protected anyone in my eyes. I mean, the amount of people that have just lost money in crypto because the SEC has actually just refused to do their job properly is staggering. And if the SEC actually cared about protecting crypto investors, they would provide clarity, right? They would provide regulatory clarity to people building crypto stuff so that these people weren't forced to go offshore or forced to host their things offshore, right? And then people get hurt by that because it's unregulated, right? Like that's the most bizarre thing about this, is that the SEC, or I guess regulatory bodies in the US, won't provide clarity. And then what ends up happening is that because they don't provide clarity, they force these businesses offshore, and then there's no regulations at all on these businesses. And we see what happens, right? FTX blows up, Celsius blows up, BlockFi blows up. So taking all that into account, right? You can see that in a roundabout way, the SEC is actually responsible for people getting hurt, right? They're doing the exact opposite of what their mandate is to do. But yeah, anyway, I'm going to end that rant there. But there is a post here from Coin Center talking about this bill from Elizabeth Warren here, and Niraj from Coin Center said the Digital Asset Anti-Money Laundering Act is an opportunistic, unconstitutional assault on cryptocurrency self-custody, developers, and node operators. Nothing about the bill would prevent the next FTX. In fact, it puts users at more risk. And there's a blog post here. I don't think it's too long that you can read, which goes into a bit more detail. So yeah, as I said, I don't think there's any chance of this bill, going into law or becoming regulation or anything like that. But I guess what it does is it still sends the signal that these politicians are out of touch. They need more education. Not all of them. They need more education. We need to keep the pressure on, and we need to make sure that both them and their constituents and people who support them understand that what they're saying isn't actually going to protect anyone. It's actually going to result in a worse outcome. And then we can go from there. Now, as I said, not everyone in Congress is, I guess, blind to crypto. Not everyone is biased against crypto. And one of our biggest champions right now is someone called Tom Emmer, who I've highlighted on the podcast before. Now, I have gotten a bit of pushback on highlighting Tom Emmer before. I don't know what his politics are. I mean, I'm not in the US, so I don't really follow these politicians very closely, but he's been an ally for the crypto ecosystem in Congress. And I think taking that as it is, right? Taking that as kind of like in a vacuum, that's all I'm seeing. I'm just seeing him representing crypto positively in Congress. So I hope he continues to do that, regardless of his other policies or his other politics, right? So he put out a tweet today where he says, probably a good time to re-up my bipartisan Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act. The bill asserts that blockchain entities that never custody customer funds are not money transmitters, providing necessary legal certainty to ensure the future of crypto reflects American values. Now, this is, I guess, like on the right track of what to do here. If there are things that don't custody assets, right, they shouldn't be regulated like things that do custody assets. That's just common sense. And I've discussed this before on the Refuel when I said that a lot of regulations are put on these centralized service providers because they custody assets. I mean, the whole point is to make it so that something like FTX doesn't happen, right? At least that's the stated point. Now, when we have non-custodial, decentralized financial services that people can use and self-custody the assets themselves, we don't need those regulations, right? The regulations are built into the code. For example, when you are interacting with Uniswap as a liquidity provider, you put the liquidity in a smart contract. You retain custody over that the entire time. Yes, you've given permission to Uniswap to use that liquidity and for people to come in and trade in and out of it, and you do suffer losses if it trades against you, or you can make a profit if it trades with you, and you get fees for that and everything like that. But no one can withdraw your liquidity from Uniswap except you. So you're using a DeFi protocol in a non-custodial way. There's no way for anyone to, because Uniswap is a fully decentralized set of smart contracts on Ethereum, and that smart contracts, the code in those smart contracts is what's regulating that. So we don't need meat-based regulations to handle that because it's all on chain. Whereas with centralized entities, they custody assets, right? They use fiat. They are subject to KYC and AML regulations because they need to interact with the banking system, right? So those should be regulated. I've got nothing against that. There is a line where it starts getting really shitty. I mean, I know Coinbase is guilty of this, where they just keep asking people all these really invasive questions, like, what's your employment history? What's the source of funds? What's the name of your firstborn child? Like all these they don't ask that, but all these like super invasive questions, and it's actually becoming like they're more regulated than banks. And it's crazy because I set up my first bank account, which I still use today, 12 years ago when I turned 18. And I have not once been asked any of those invasive questions by them. The most questions they asked me was when I was applying for a mortgage for my home, right? That was the most questions they asked me, and it was probably less invasive than what I get asked from centralized exchanges from time to time. So those things, should be regulated, but I actually think they're regulated too much at this point. It's very stifling, and I think that, as I said, like Coinbase has no choice in the matter. They have to abide by these things. It's not them wanting to collect all this information. It's the government agencies asking for this. But when it comes to DeFi, when it comes to self-custody, when it comes to anything like that, you really shouldn't be regulating that the same way you regulate centralized services. So I'm glad that Tom is in our court here, in our side of the court here in Congress to, I guess, push back against people like Elizabeth Warren and others like Gary Gensler, who just view this thing as something to just clamp down on, regulate the hell out of, and then that'll somehow help people and make it so people can't lose money or protect people, which it won't do. It'll just push everything offshore. There's no stopping this movement. There's no stopping these networks. As we've seen, not even OFAC can stop Ethereum related apps, right? Decentralized apps on Ethereum. It can, I guess, like hamper it a little bit, but it can't outright stop it. And that is the power of what we have here. So let's make sure that we get these, I guess, like proper regulatory frameworks in place. Even if the regulations say, don't, hey, like leave this non-custodial stuff alone. There's no need to regulate that if it's regulated by code. Whereas with the CeFi services, definitely regulate those things. But also I would like to see them have more clarity so they don't have to keep asking like all these invasive questions, because that is not good for, I guess, values that we all hold dear. American values, generally, like if America prides itself on their values, then I don't think they're upholding it with their current approach to crypto here. That's my kind of view from the outside. But anyway, going to move on from the regulatory stuff for today, but just wanted to go over that because I figured it was important. All right, so just a small update on the FTX situation here. It seems that all of, or at least most of, SBF's inner circle is turning on him, or have been turning on him for many weeks now. There has been speculation about Caroline, the co-CEO of FTX, basically informing on SBF, and I don't think Caroline has actually tweeted since the collapse, whereas SBF, of course, was always tweeting, and he's in jail now, so he didn't end up getting arrested there. But another person who is hilarious that he actually turned on SBF is Ryan Salami here. I don't know how to say his last name. I'm just going to say Salami. It's the Italian in me. But Ryan's, you know who I'm talking about if you've seen him before, apparently told Bahamian regulators in the days before FTX collapsed that SBF had likely funneled customer money to Alameda, according to the Bahamian court records here. And what's hilarious about this is that on Twitter, on November 7th, Ryan was on there basically defending SBF and defending FTX. And then I called him out and said, when are you going to call out your boss for being shady or whatever? And he didn't reply, of course. But what I find funny is that 2 days later, he was informing on SBF, if I got the dates right. So I just think like this story just keeps getting crazier and crazier, and I can't wait to watch a movie or a documentary that just kind of recaps all of this. Even though I know most of the facts, I think with a bit of drama behind it, it'll make for some good entertainment, or at least like more entertainment than we've been having. But I just figured it was funny to kind of bring that up in the fact that people will do silly things, especially in the face of adversity, in the face of things feeling like they're falling apart. And what Ryan did was defend his boss till like almost the last minute, and then he flipped and said, "Oh shit, I need to basically rat out on my boss here, or else I'm going to go down with the ship. And obviously, like right up until the end, you can remain, I guess, quote unquote loyal, but as soon as things start looking like they're about to go to shit, I mean, most people abandon the ship, right? Like they don't stick around to see what happens. And I think that's what they did. So I think these people obviously are doing this as well to cut a deal for themselves. And I think they will get that deal to give all the evidence that the prosecutors need to basically nail SBF to the wall so he can't get out of it, because obviously SBF is going to, I guess, like it'll be a high profile case. He'll probably have good lawyers. A lot of things will be taken into account, like his age and I guess like where he was domiciled and his intent. Did he actually commit fraud, or was it a kind of like accident? I don't know, like whatever story he was trying to spin. But it seems that the insiders are turning on him, which means they're going to tell them, like, and as Ryan said here, that SBF knew about the commingling of deposits. He knew about taking customer deposits to do things with it. He was selling customer deposits to pump up his own coins. So yeah, I mean, the reason I bring this up is because I think it's a really positive development that these insiders are turning on him. It just means that it's way less likely that SBF is going to get away with a light sentence. And I hope he goes to prison for life for all the damage that he's done. And I want it to set an example for people. And I know people have different opinions on that, and that's fine. This is just my personal opinion. I'm not saying this out of some kind of like retribution or revenge on SBF. I didn't lose any money on there. I don't really know anyone that lost money on there personally. Obviously, a lot of people did, but it's not like I want revenge to come to me. I don't want kind of like, I'm not a vengeful person. What I want is people who, obviously do things that harm others to get punished for that, right? Like as a kind of deterrent for future actors, and also to make sure that we hold people accountable for their actions. Now, are there other punishments that SBF could have rather than throwing him in a cage and just leaving him there to rot? Of course there is. And you could make, I guess, like arguments about the criminal justice system till the cows come home, but I'm not here to do that, and I don't have the time to do that. But I think that in crypto, we need to see more people being held accountable for stuff like this, just generally. Whether that's ending up in prison, whether that's blowing up, whether that's people just denouncing them and not working with them anymore. It needs to happen like that. It needs to happen more and more going forward. And I'm going to be much more public about calling out bad actors. I don't care how many people call me an ETH Maxu, how many people shit on me for it. I'm going to be much more active calling out the bad actors than I was, because even though, in the bull market, when everyone's going crazy, it might be like a negative outcome for me personally, where I do get lambasted about it. I think, once things calm down and once the tide goes out, you do see who's been swimming naked. And I want to be, I want to be the one who's calling it out early so that I can protect anyone that would listen. And I did call out a lot of this stuff early on, like the Terra collapse and FTX being shady and Celsius and stuff like that, and a lot of the other scammers in this ecosystem. And hopefully people listen to me. But like, even if I only have one person that listens to me, that's good enough for me. If I can help one person, that's good enough for me. And that's always been my motto. I think I've talked about that on the Refuel from the very beginning, basically. And that doesn't just go for calling out bad actors, but that also goes for educating people about the Ethereum ecosystem. But anyway, on that note, moving on. All right, so the RocketPool oDao vote for myself is going forward right now. Superfizz was the first person to vote for me, and I thank him for this. And then Buddha came in and voted for me second. I think I have 6 votes right now. I'm not entirely sure what the threshold is there to get me accepted, but they've all been yes votes so far, so I'm very excited with that. But yeah, I should be part of the oDao any day now. So super exciting, guys. And just I guess like a recap, I've had to borrow the 1750 RPL that is needed to collateralize the oDao node here, to put up as a bond, I should say. I had to borrow that from the RocketPool folk because I accidentally staked, or I guess like stupidly staked, my 1100 RPL, which is just stuck now in my mini pool. I'm going to spin up more mini pools. Don't worry about that, but it's just stuck there right now. And I don't exactly have the spare capital to buy 1,750 RPL right now. So I borrowed it. I'm going to pay it back over time. It should take around 3 months at the current oDao reward rate. And then after I pay that back, I'm going to send all the RPL rewards to the Protocol Guild as promised. So if you see RPL going to a non-protocol address, it's because I'm paying back that bond. And then once that is done, the rest of the rewards will go to the Protocol Guild there. But yeah, exciting times, guys. Very exciting times for myself and I guess for RocketPool. It seems people are very supportive of me joining the oDao, and I thank them for that support. All right, so a new blog post around PBS today from Julian, who works in the Robust Incentives group at the Ethereum Foundation. So this blog post is titled Block versus Slot Auction Propose a Builder Separation. And Julian says on Twitter, PBS aims to ensure all proposers receive equal rewards in expectation, regardless of sophistication. In this post, we examine the effects of two different auction mechanisms, block auctions and slot auctions, and introduce a new hybrid auction mechanism. And you can read this blog post for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But this is well worth the read here. I think I was talking in the Discord channel about this today. There are really kind of two schools of, MEV, or two schools of thought around like fixing or mitigating toxic externalities of MEV and fixing censorship concerns around MEV on Ethereum. The first is using these kind of add-on or sidecar software like MEV Boost, which is obviously what we're seeing used predominantly today. And then the second is in-protocol solutions like PBS. Now, the difference is that fact that the MEV Boost is not in protocol. It is a sidecar solution. It exists outside of the protocol itself, and it's so popular because MEV is such a lucrative thing, right? Whereas PBS is, and when it eventually comes to the network, will be directly integrated in protocol. It won't be like MEV Boost, which is a sidecar. It'll be in the protocol, which means it's not optional, right? It's there. Everyone has to run it as part of their nodes and validators, whereas MEV Boost is completely optional. Like, I don't run MEV Boost on my nodes. I do on my mini pool, but I don't on my solo staking nodes, and it's completely optional which relayers I talk to as well. Whereas with PBS, it is, as far as I understand it, it is not optional to become part of the core protocol, and then every validator will be subject to it there. So it's very important to understand the distinction there between those two, and especially in the face of something like Suave that Flashbots is developing. Suave, there are concerns around that. There are centralization concerns. There are concerns around them using Intel SGX for block building purposes. But I think Suave is not going to be the end game for Ethereum Layer 1, MEV, and censorship resistance, and just anything got to do with MEV. I think Suave will probably have like a much better future and career at Layer 2, like doing things at Layer 2. But I don't think it should be a dominating force on Layer 1 Ethereum. I think that we should solve MEV-related issues and censorship-related issues at the protocol layer with PBS, with CR lists, with things like encrypted mempool, rather than extra protocol or kind of like outside of the protocol with MEV Boost. That's just my personal thoughts on it, but I think that's the only healthy, long-term sustainable way to actually get to where we want to be. But anyway, you can read this blog post from Julian here. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, some massive news out of Metamask today. So they said on Twitter, Metamask US users will now be able to fund their wallet with ETH via PayPal, rolling out in the next weeks in the US, excluding Hawaii, through the Metamask mobile app. So basically, you can go straight from PayPal, buy ETH with PayPal on Metamask in a few easy steps. There's a little video here showing what it's like. You click the buy button. It's available in the US. You select PayPal in the options that kind of go there. You choose the amount of ETH to buy, and then tap Pay with PayPal. Of course, you can select your payment method there, and then it'll kind of pop up in your MetaMask mobile balance here. Now, the reason why this is such a big deal is because PayPal has an absolutely massive user base. Last time I checked, it was like 300 or 400 million people that use PayPal. It is ubiquitous across the web. I mean, if you're doing any e-commerce, most of the time you're probably doing it with PayPal, or you at least have a PayPal account that you use. So the fact that this is integrated with MetaMask is really, really awesome. Now, of course, there's probably going to be some high-ish fees associated with this. I don't know exactly what the fees are, but it will probably end up costing more just from the convenience of it than maybe going through a centralized exchange and then withdrawing to MetaMask directly. And it will, of course, depend on the size that you're buying and things like that, and what payment process you're using, whether it's a credit card or a bank balance or a PayPal balance, right? I'm sure there's different fees associated with those things there, but this is a massive step for adoption, I believe. I mean, it's really cool because of that one tap kind of thing, where essentially as soon as you hit buy on MetaMask mobile wallet, it goes through the normal PayPal interface that everyone is used to. So it's not introducing some new interface that people have to learn or have to get used to or have to trust. It's just the classic PayPal interface that everyone's already used to, and then they have ETH directly in their MetaMask ready to go to do whatever they want, right? Do DeFi stuff, do NFT stuff, do whatever you want there. I'm looking forward to this coming to the extension as well, not just the mobile wallet, which I'm sure they're going to try and get that onboarded there. And I'm looking forward to other wallets having this integration as well. It seems PayPal is very open to crypto. I mean, I remember a while ago they actually announced and integrated crypto directly into their platform. They've been slow to move, obviously big company and all that, but great to see that this from Metamask today. I think it's a really big deal. And yeah, if you have a PayPal account and you use Metamask Mobile, might be something you're interested in. So I'll link the blog post here in the YouTube description. It's got a bit more details, but great to see this from Metamask and PayPal today. All right, we have an update on Polygon's zkEVM from Jordi Baylina, who is working on it, or is basically the main architect behind it here. So he said, in the last weeks, we started the audits for the Polygon zkEVM. We are also in the final steps before the launch of what should be the last testnet before mainnet. Here are some of the updates. So the proving time right now is 2.5 minutes in a $7 an hour AWS instance. Gas limit per batch is about 10 million gas. Proof aggregation. Provers will be able to proof any segment size of the chain. He thanks Plonky2 by Polygon Zero Tech. They can generate this infinite recursive proof very fast and more optimal start construction. Thank you to Polygon Maiden, and a very useful trick from Dan to handle intermediate polynomials. So you can see the different Polygon ZK teams working together nicely here. Now, Polynard did the math for us. He said, great to see benchmarks. This gets an L1 block down to 43 cents per block, or $0.003 per transaction. That's basically a third of a cent per transaction. L1 target times achieved by 100 provers in parallel. And the next steps would be to standardize around a selected block, release benchmarking provers that can be independently verified, and data from all zkEVMs. And then Jordi replied and said, we are targeting a proof below 1 minute by using GPUs. For benchmarking, we are using the following references: a batch full of standard ETH transfer, a batch full of standard ERC20 transfers, a batch full of Uniswap exchanges, and a batch full of ERC20 token deployments. So as I said to you guys before, different things that you do on Ethereum and I guess like EVM networks cost different amounts of gas, and that's what they're testing here. But I really like this stat that Polygon kind of brought up here, that it drops it down to a third of a cent per transaction cost on L1. That's crazy. I mean, like as I've said before, these old L1s that had like sub-cent transaction fees, they're not going to be able to compete with layer 2s. Like we are so early in the layer 2 race right now, and the costs are already this low. Could you imagine how low these costs are going to be once we get more efficient provers, once we get more efficient ZK technology that can work directly with these provers? As I've mentioned before, there are companies working on this, like Ingonyama, working on the hardware behind it. Imagine you have a perfect marriage between the hardware on Ingonyama's side and the software on the zkEVM, or I guess like general ZK side. You're going to see a very nice and beautiful explosion of cheap, decentralized, secured by Ethereum block space, that we are going to get to the point very quickly where there's more decentralized cheap block space than there is demand to fill it. And that is going to be a new paradigm for crypto, because traditionally we haven't had that, right? We've had an overflow of blocks, of decentralized blocks, overflow of demand, which pushes the gas prices up on Ethereum Layer 1 and the Ethereum Layer 2s as well, of course, and makes it so that it's not sub-cent transaction fees, and it's not transaction fees that are basically negligible for users. But with ZK tech, with the hardware stuff that I'm talking about, with, I guess, better software optimizations at Layer 2 and at Layer 1 as well, of course, we're going to get to a world where everyone will be able to enjoy fast, cheap, decentralized, and secured by Ethereum transactions, without having to basically jump through hoops to do that. So I couldn't be more excited for the future of the Ethereum ecosystem when it comes to scaling. I think we've finally cracked that nut. It took us a while to get here, but relative to, I guess, how old Ethereum is, or relative to how old crypto is, didn't take us very long at all. So yeah, I'm super excited about that. But I'll link Jordi's tweet thread in the YouTube description if you want to check it out for yourself, and the replies as well. All right, so StarkNet announced today their next step in decentralization, which is voting on protocol changes. Next up is StarkNet's governance, which will span over the next few months, and you can see the details of this here. So the TLDR is the first vote to approve or reject proposed changes to StarkNet protocol will take place soon. The participants in the votes during the first phase will be token holders, delegates selected by token holders who prefer to delegate their voting rights, delegates selected by the StarkNet Foundation to exercise some of its voting rights, and a professional builders council set by the StarkNet Foundation. So there's this builders council here. I don't know if the members have been announced yet, but I mean, this is in line with a lot of the other L2s out there that have like this security council, this kind of builders council that or the governance council that is working in the early stages of the protocol to make sure that things can run along smoothly. But always great to see governance updates from these layer 2s. They all have different approaches, but check out this blog post from StarkNet here. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to give a read, but great to see an update. And I'm just going to run through the rest of the updates because I'm coming up on time here. So Arbitrum announced today that they have integrated Chainlink automation on Arbitrum One. Now, developers can securely and reliably automate their smart contracts to build more advanced dApps on Arbitrum. Very cool to see this. I think, Arbitrum is integrating all these middleware protocols really early on, I think is what led to their early success, especially Chainlink they had on board early on. And they've been working with the Chainlink folks for quite a while. So great to see them keep that, spark alive with Chainlink here. And if you're a developer, this will mean a lot to you. So again, blog post will be linked in the YouTube description for you to check out. And just one more Arbitrum-related announcement was from a project that just came across my Twitter feed today that I thought was worth highlighting, something called Orbital, which is basically an upcoming AMM from the people behind Dopex and Plutus, with the singular goal of becoming the premier native decentralized exchange on Arbitrum. Remember how I said before that I would love to see more decentralized exchange competition for Uniswap, and I'd love to see it at layer 2s? Well, here we go. And that's why I'm bringing this up, because I just love more competition in the DEX space, because it's very important that Uniswap be challenged and continues to be challenged. I don't want Uniswap to be the end-all and the be-all and end-all of decentralized exchanges, of AMMs. On both layer 1 and layer 2, so it's great to see that Orbital is making an attempt to build something, at least better or more innovative, or at least just challenge Uniswap. I think it's really great and really healthy for the ecosystem. But on that note, that's going to be it for today. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.